Space is a graveyard of ambition. For every triumph written into the stars, there are 1,000 vessels that vanished without a whisper. But among those silent tombs, one name still echoes through the corridors of human memory with a particular chill. A name that, even a century later, causes seasoned flight officers to lower their eyes. The USG Ishimura. She was not a warship. She was not designed for conquest, nor for exploration. She was a tool, the most ambitious industrial machine ever conceived. A city-sized leviathan built to tear planets apart. And in the end, she became something else entirely. A floating mausoleum, a monument to madness, and the birthplace of a nightmare that would nearly consume humanity. This is the complete history of the USG Ishimura. From her groundbreaking construction to her descent into hell. From the first discovery of the marker on Aegis 7 to the final silence of her life support systems. This is the story of a ship that changed everything, and the souls who were lost inside her. To understand the Ishimura, you must first understand the desperate hunger that created her. By the late 24th century, humanity had sprawled across dozens of star systems, but its expansion came with a paradox. The homeworld and its oldest colonies were running out of accessible minerals. Deep core mining could no longer sustain the demand for heavy metals, rare earths, and radioisotopes needed for starship construction, city infrastructure, and the insatiable military-industrial complexes of EarthGov and the sovereign colonies. The solution came from the Concordance Extraction Corporation, the largest mining conglomerate in human space. Their proposal was radical, some would say sacrilegious. Entire celestial bodies, moons, asteroid fragments, even small tectonically dead planets, would be shattered in controlled sequences. The debris would be pulled into massive smelting bays, processed in situ, and converted into usable material. They called it planet cracking, and to do it, they needed a ship unlike any other. The Ishimura was not just a vessel. She was the prototype of an entirely new class, an interstellar planet cracker class that would redefine resource extraction. Her keel was laid in orbit of Saturn's moon Enceladus in the year 2443 at the sprawling Titan Yards. She took 3 years to complete, requiring over 1 million individual hull plates, a revolutionary shock-point drive for faster-than-light travel, and an unprecedented gravity tether system that could suspend a fractured planetoid in a stable envelope while processing ships' plucked choice fragments from the field. Her name was chosen with care. Ishimura was an ancient Japanese word evoking a stone village, a community anchored in the unyielding. It was a name that spoke of endurance, of permanence in the void. Her official designation, USG Ishimura, stood for United Spacegoing, a civilian registry that belied the monumental power she represented. Power enough to crack a world. At the heart of the Ishimura lay the shock-point drive, a marvel of quantum engineering that allowed her to bypass relativistic constraints. A shock-point jump folded spacetime, punching a singularity between points. It was not comfortable. Crew logs described the sensation as being ripped apart and reassembled by a distracted god. But it worked. The Ishimura could travel to a distant dead system, execute a multi-year cracking operation, and return with enough processed or to build a dozen battlecruisers. The economics changed overnight. Her first official cracking operation occurred in 2446, targeting a moonlet in the Cygnus system. The event was broadcast across the colonies as a triumph of engineering. Corporate executives toasted champagne. Investors doubled their portfolios. The Ishimura returned with billions of tons of refined platinum, iridium, and hafnium. She was instantly the most profitable single asset ever constructed by a private entity. And the Concordance Extraction Corporation wasted no time ordering sister ships. The Ishimura would become the first of a fleet. For the next 6 decades, the Ishimura operated without major incident. Her list of cracked celestial bodies grew long. Kepler, 22b's fourth moon, the Mantis cluster fragment, the Vangelis Deep. She became a legend, a symbol of mankind's dominion over nature. Crew members who served aboard her wore their service patches with pride. To serve on the Ishimura was to stand at the pinnacle of civilian spacefaring. But pride, as we shall see, has a way of attracting shadows. A ship that spends years in deep space is more than a machine. It is a microcosm of civilization. The Ishimura's permanent crew numbered over 1,300 souls, but during cracking operations, that figure could swell to well over 2,000, supplemented by contractors, engineers, scientific personnel, and, tragically, families. CEC policy permitted long-term crew to bring spouses and children, fostering a generation that was born and raised in the cold dark. The ship was divided into distinct decks, each a self-contained ecosystem. The bridge commanded operations from the bow, overseeing the gravity tethers and main mining array. Engineering, buried deep in the ship's spine, housed the shock point drive, the power relays, and the thermal control system, a labyrinth of catwalks and coolant pipes so dangerous that crew called it the burn ward. The medical deck featured a full hospital, a quarantine wing, and a psychiatric evaluation suite. Then came the crew deck, with its quarters, mess halls, and the hydroponic gardens that recycled air and provided fresh food. The mining deck was the ship's reason for being. Here, asteroid fragments and planetoid chunks were fed into colossal smelters, processed, and stored in kilometer-long cargo holds. The noise was deafening. Workers communicated via hardwired comms. Temperatures could reach lethal levels near the crucibles. Accidents were not uncommon, and the ship's medical staff were kept busy with crush injuries, burns, and the occasional decompression event. Every crew member wore a resource integration gear, or RIG, a spinal-mounted harness that monitored vital signs, projected a holographic health indicator, and provided real-time communication and navigation. The rig's color told a story at a glance. Vibrant cyan for peak health, a gradual shift through green to yellow, and finally an ominous red strobe as life ebbed away. In the later days of the Ishimura, that red light would become a chorus. Faith also found a foothold. The Church of Unitology, that pervasive and politically entangled faith that preached a divine unity through the markers, had a significant presence aboard. Unitologist scripture spoke of convergence, of a rebirth beyond the flesh. Many crew members were the spiral icon openly. The chief science officer was a known adherent. Even Captain Matthews was reported to be sympathetic, though officially secular in his command. The ship's chaplain, a soft-spoken man named Dr. Kine, would later become a pivotal figure, but at this point, his sermons were merely comforting words in the void. By 2508, the Ishimura was 62 years old, ancient for a mining vessel, but meticulously maintained. She had undergone multiple refits, her original systems upgraded, her hull patched 1,000 times. Her captain was Benjamin Matthews, a veteran of the CEC with a spotless record. Her chief engineer was Temple, a genial but exacting man. Her medical officer, Dr. Nicole Brennan, was a brilliant neurospecialist, assigned by EarthGov for reasons that were never fully disclosed in the official manifest. Every one of these individuals would soon find their professional skills warped into desperate survival, or worse. The planet Aegis 7 was designated a Class 4 tectonically inactive body, ideal for cracking. It was remote, unremarkable, and thoroughly surveyed. Or so the CEC believed. What they did not know, what they could not have known, was that they were not the first humans to set foot there. And buried deep beneath the planet's crust, something had been waiting. The initial phase of the operation was routine. The Ishimura disgorged shuttles carrying colony modules, earth-moving equipment, and a survey team. For weeks, they drilled test boreholes, planted seismic charges, and mapped the fracture lines. Then, in one of the deepest trenches, a drill head struck something that was not rock. It was a marker, a red marker, specifically designated Marker 3A by EarthGov intelligence after the fact. To the miners, it was a mystery. To the unitologists among the crew, it was the divine artifact promised by their prophets, the instrument of convergence. But to the captain and the corporate backers, it was a priceless discovery. Orders came swiftly from the highest levels of the Concordance Extraction Corporation. The marker was to be extracted, transported to the Ishimura, and studied in secret. The cracking operation was suspended. Aegis 7 became a quarantine zone, and the colony's population of several hundred souls was now effectively imprisoned with an object that did not belong in our universe. The effects began within days. Insomnia, paranoia, auditory hallucinations, a ceaseless, whispering signal that seemed to emanate from the marker itself, operating at a frequency that no standard equipment could fully block. Crew members reported seeing dead relatives. Minor disagreements escalated into physical violence. The colony's psych officer logged a 900% increase in acute psychosis cases. But extraction continued. The CEC wanted their prize. Once aboard, the marker was placed in the cargo bay, under heavy security. Dr. Chalice Mercer, the ship's chief science officer and a zealous unitologist, assumed de facto control of the research. Mercer was not a dispassionate observer. In his personal logs, he described the marker's signal as the voice of the makers, guiding us toward reunion. He believed the psychosis was a transcendental awakening, not a sickness. And as Captain Matthews grew increasingly erratic under the marker's influence, Mercer's power aboard the ship expanded. The ship's descent was gradual at first, a creeping decay of order. A security officer named Alyssa Vincent began filing reports of unexplained behavioral shifts. In engineering, technicians reported equipment malfunctions that defied explanation, circuits rerouting themselves, display screens flashing marker glyphs. The dead whispers grew louder, more distinct. And then came the murders. A colony geologist bludgeoned 2 colleagues with a rock hammer, calmly carving spiral marks into his own skin afterward. A shuttle pilot flew his vessel into the main hangar doors, killing himself and 7 others, leaving a final transmission. I can see them now. They're so beautiful. The Ishimura's security teams were overwhelmed. The marker's signal was no longer just a whisper, it was a scream. The horror that followed has been exhaustively documented in the survivor accounts of Isaac Clarke and the fragments recovered from the ship's black box. The marker's true purpose was not communication. It was reanimation. The signal it emitted, a powerful electromagnetic waveform, rewrote the genetic code of any dead tissue within its range, repurposing biomass into twisted, lethal forms. The colonists and crew who died, whether by violence, suicide, or the growing psychosis, did not stay dead. They transformed. The necromorph outbreak had begun. Within 72 hours of the marker's arrival, Aegis 7 was a slaughterhouse. The colony fell silent. The Ishimura, losing all contact with the surface, initiated emergency quarantine protocols. But it was far too late. The marker was already inside. The first confirmed necromorph on board the Ishimura was recorded by a security camera at 3:42 a.m. ship time on a Tuesday. The victim was Ensign Toby Rieger, who had died of a self-inflicted wound an hour earlier. By the time the security team arrived, Rieger was no longer human. The team was dead within minutes, and every body they left behind became another monster. The exponential spread of the infection, what the unitologists called convergence, was catastrophic. Captain Matthews, by now completely compromised by the marker's influence, issued fragmented orders. He sealed the bridge, believing the hallucinations were a test of faith. He refused to send a general distress call, fearing CEC would send a unit to confiscate the marker. He deliberately stranded his own crew. Chief Security Officer Vincent attempted a counteroffensive, organizing squads to retake key junctions. They learned, with terrible cost, that conventional small arms were nearly useless. Severed limbs merely slowed the creatures. The only effective method was systematic dismemberment. Mining tools, plasma cutters, ripper saws, force guns, became the weapons of last resort. Dr. Nicole Brennan, the medical officer, became a paradoxical beacon of hope and tragedy. She realized early that the marker was the source of the signal, and that the signal was the root of both the psychosis and the reanimation. She worked frantically to understand the marker's biology, setting up a lab in the medical deck, protected by makeshift barricades. Her theory, that destroying the marker might end the signal and stop the necromorphs, was dangerous heresy to Mercer and the unitologists. In her final video logs, she appears increasingly haggard, whispering to herself, but also to her partner, Isaac Clarke. She recorded messages for him, hoping they would somehow reach him. Those messages would eventually lure Clarke, an engineer, into the heart of the nightmare. But for now, Nicole was trapped. As the situation deteriorated, she faced not only the necromorphs, but also Dr. Mercer, who saw her as an obstacle to his apotheosis. Mercer had come to believe that the necromorphs were a form of rebirth, that the human body was merely a chrysalis. He began offering survivors to the creatures, calling it bringing them to the marker. He set up a personal chapel in the hydroponics deck, surrounded by growing corruption, a fleshy, spreading organic biofilm that pulsed like a living thing. The corruption, as it came to be called, was an extension of the marker's influence. It consumed bulkheads, fused corpses into walls, and generated toxic spores. It also enabled the creation of more specialized necromorphs. Infectors, winged, proboscis-bearing creatures, specifically sought out fresh corpses to inject with recombinant tissue, speeding the transformation. The Ishimura's ventilation system, a labyrinth covering kilometers of ductwork, became a hunting ground for the stalking lurker and the explosive swarm. The ship's AI, known as the ship's captain, was not fully self-aware but ran automated quarantine protocols. It sealed doors, shut down sections, and purged atmosphere when contamination was detected. This inadvertently trapped survivors in compartments with no oxygen or opened corridors directly into necromorph hordes. The very systems meant to protect the crew became their executioner. One by one, the pockets of resistance fell. The security team was massacred. Engineering was flooded with radiation after a failed attempt to scuttle the ship. The bridge, sealed off by Matthews, became a tomb. In his final moments, Captain Matthews was confronted by Dr. Kine, the ship's chaplain, who had finally broken free of the unitologist delusion. Kine killed Matthews, taking a level of control and attempting to enact Nicole's plan, return the marker to the planet and destroy it. But Kine was alone, unstable, and surrounded. The Ishimura drifted, a dead ship sailing on corpses. Then, on the outer edge of the system, a small ship dropped out of shock space. It was the USG Kellyan, carrying a response team dispatched by CEC. On board were Chief Engineer Isaac Clarke, Computer Specialist Kendra Daniels, and Security Officers Hammond and Chun. Their mission: investigate the Ishimura's communications blackout and render technical assistance. They had no idea what waited for them. Their arrival, intended as a rescue, would instead become the final act of the Ishimura's tragedy and the opening chapter of a new horror. Isaac Clarke was not a soldier. He was an engineer, an expert in ship systems, sent to fix a broken transmitter. His presence on the mission was partly motivated by his desperate hope of finding Nicole Brennan alive. From the moment the Kellyan's landing gear scraped the deck, the team was under attack. Chun was lost almost immediately, dragged into a vent by a slasher. Hammond took command, barking orders, but the ship was a living nightmare. The logs they found, the blood-smeared walls, the whispered messages scrawled in marker, all spoke of a cataclysm they could barely comprehend. Guided by Nicole's increasingly fragmented transmissions, Isaac and Hammond navigated the ship, restoring power to key systems. They encountered Dr. Mercer, who by now had become a prophet of carnage, openly ordering necromorphs to attack them. They found Dr. Kine, half-mad but lucid enough to explain the plan. Overload the gravity tethers, pull a chunk of Aegis VI's crust into the ship, and return the marker to the planet's surface, where it could be destroyed by the remaining seismic charges. And they met Kendra Daniels' true purpose. Kendra Daniels was not a computer specialist. She was an EarthGov intelligence operative, assigned to retrieve Marker 3A for her government's own clandestine research program. She had known about the marker all along. She had used Clarke as a tool to clear a path. In the ship's final moments, she betrayed them all, shooting Kine and attempting to abscond with the marker on a shuttle. But the Ishimura had one last horror to unleash. The marker's removal destabilized the entire region. The true guardian of Aegis 7, a gargantuan necromorph known as the Hive Mind, awakened. The creature was the nexus of the outbreak, a nightmare of fused flesh and primal rage. It seized the shuttle carrying the marker and dragged it back to the planet. Kendra was killed instantly. Isaac, left alone, made the impossible choice. He descended to the surface, faced the Hive Mind in the open air of a dying world, and destroyed it. He then recovered the marker and, using the overloaded gravity tethers, sent the artifact crashing back into the planet's core. The destruction of the marker triggered a catastrophic tectonic event. Aegis 7 cracked open, raining debris on the Ishimura. The ship's superstructure, already compromised, twisted and fractured. Clarke fled through collapsing corridors, escaping on a shuttle as the planetary fragment the Ishimura had been mining broke apart completely. The last recorded image of the Ishimura from that moment shows her adrift, her spine split, her engines cold, surrounded by a field of frozen corpses and shattered rock. But the Ishimura's story did not end with Isaac Clarke's escape. The ship was dead, but not forgotten. And EarthGov was not yet done with her. The ship was painstakingly dismantled over the course of 2 years, her remains transported to Titan Station, a sprawling metropolis built into the shards of Saturn's moon. The government sector of Titan Station contained a classified research wing, where pieces of the Ishimura, her computer cores, her marker research labs, even sections of the corruption-coded bulkheads, were studied in the hopes of understanding and weaponizing the marker signal. The project, known as Titan Station Directorate, was overseen by Director Hans Tiedemann. It would ultimately lead to the construction of a new, even more dangerous marker, the Site-12 marker. Isaac Clarke himself returned to the Ishimura's bones. During the events of the Titan Station outbreak in 2511, he was forced to traverse the salvaged sections of his old nightmare, the corridors still reeking of death, the marker's whispers now amplified by the new artifact. The Ishimura became, in essence, a haunted house grafted onto an even larger haunted house, a monument to human folly repurposed as a laboratory for catastrophe. When Titan Station was destroyed to halt the necromorph outbreak, the last physical remnants of the USG Ishimura were vaporized in the resulting detonation. The ship that had cracked worlds was finally reduced to atoms. But her legacy could not be so easily erased. The marker signal had already spread. The Brethren moons, awakened by the convergence events, began to stir. The Ishimura was not the cause of humanity's near extinction, merely the first domino to fall. In the archives of the sovereign colonies, in the forbidden logs of EarthGov's deepest vaults, the name Ishimura is spoken with both reverence and revulsion. She was a marvel of engineering, a city of hope that became a charnel house. Her corridors taught us that some thresholds, once crossed, can never be uncrossed, that the universe holds designs far older and more terrible than our own, and that the pursuit of knowledge, untempered by wisdom, can open doors to absolute annihilation. The USG Ishimura, first of her kind, last of her age, a ghost ship whose echoes will resonate as long as humanity remembers the sound of tearing metal and the whisper that promises, forever, to make us whole.